Okay, then welcome to the qep'a. It's great to talk to you again. I can't really see you, but
it's great to be here. However it is I'm managing to be here in part. So how do you want to work this? It's interesting because, for the past however many years, all this Klingon stuff has been done by other people. I don't know what I can add to the conversation, but I'll try.
Well, I have a whole slew of questions that people have submitted. So I'm going to try and go through them and try and pick out some of the ones that are probably easier to answer right now. And then if people in the audience have questions, there's a button at the bottom of the screen that you can click where you can raise your hand. And then I can pick you and promote you up here, and then you can ask your question directly. And then we can pop you back in the audience again. That's probably a fun way to do this as well. But I'm going to start off with my own question. How have you been for the past year?
I've been fine. I've been like everybody else. I've been not going anywhere, not doing anything that I can't do from home. And I've been learning all about Zoom.
So you're a Zoom expert now?
I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but at least it's not daunting anymore.
So that's why we had to throw in Discord, just to mess with you a little bit.
Yeah, and again, you did a very good job with that. I'm totally confused by Discord, but anyway.
So have you been up to any projects or anything like that that you'd like to tell us about?
That I'd like to tell you about, or that I can tell you about. Well, the last big project was what seemed like an endless list of words that you distributed yesterday, I guess. There was that, little requests here and there coming in from various people about things that I could help them with. Not much else that non-disclosure things let me talk about.
So we should
don't get excited about the non-disclosure thing. There's not very much of that either.
Oh, that's what I was about to say. So should we keep our eyes peeled for something interesting coming in the future?
Oh, it's absolutely fascinating and interesting, but it's teeny and tiny.
Okay. Okay, so let me delve into these questions now because I have lots of them. So I'm just going to start with the first one. So I got a question from qep'a. There was actually a discussion here on Discord the other day about the verb mip, which means to be rich. And the conversation kind of went around, is this a verb that can be used to describe deposits of valuable minerals or precious metals in the ground, or is it something that's limited to people, wealth, or people, individuals? Now, I don't know if there's something you can answer, but...
Yeah, no, that came up in some other context for me lately. I wonder why. I can't remember. Anyway, I would say that it refers to people and money and stuff like that.
So not a rich deposit of gemstones or something like that. That's
a different word, right?
Okay.
Well, that's confusing because gemstones are worth money, but it's a different word for rich soil or something or other. Yeah.
Okay, so like ore or something like that may be worth money, but you have to do a bunch of stuff to it. But some people describe a land as being rich.
Yeah, the land isn't rich, and the ore isn't rich. After you do something with it, the person may be rich.
Well, hopefully that answers that question.
That probably opens up another question, though, like how do you say the other thing? But that's for some other time.
So that's for some other time, yep. Okay, so then another one, I know this may have been based on a conversation that happened here on Discord. Lots of conversations happen here. Someone asked, Fergus Q, I don't know what his Klingon name is, asked, what does q'rgh combined with pu produce? So like kong q'rgh, what is that? Or q'rgh. How would you translate those? Because we see a lot of like qorgh for, you know, people tend to use that for like sleeping,
Yeah.
or the act of sleeping.
So having sleepedness, I guess. I don't know how you say that in English. You can say stuff in Klingon you can't say in English.
So this would be one of those things you think is like very awkward to say in English, but in Klingon, it's like, oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. You know, the fact that you can say stuff doesn't mean that you should say stuff.
I agree. Well, hopefully that answers that question. Okay, on to the next one. So cha'maH asked, there is two verbs for punish. There's bidge, which you used a whole bunch in that Star Trek interactive VCR board game. You remember that one with Gowron, where he wasn't playing Gowron? And then there's another verb, qep'a, which also means to punish. Do you happen to know what the difference between these two might be?
That's a really good Maltz question. It's his responsibility for telling me the words, and I'll have to get him to tell me the difference between those two words, or he'll face appropriate punishment. Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of Maltz, somebody else.
Someone's writing it down, right?
Yeah, I have these written down, so I can send them to you. The ones that
Okay.
we didn't get answers to, I will send those to you. So somebody, speaking of Maltz, someone did ask how Maltz is faring during the pandemic.
Maltz is having the time of his life because he's not very sociable anyway, so he could hardly tell the difference.
So he probably doesn't even know there's a pandemic really going on, right?
Well, you know, he hears rumors. The basement is not airtight, fortunately.
Right, that would soundproofed, I think is.
Nor is it soundproof, especially in the neighborhood where he lives, or where I live, I guess.
Well, that's good, because we wouldn't want anything to happen to him.
No.
And so the next question I have is someone's asking TJ asks how to talk about riding a bicycle. We have a couple of words. We have leer, which is to ride, and then we have shed, which is to drive. Would we use one of these for operating a bicycle? Would we drive it? Do we ride it? Or is that another Maltz question?
That's another Maltz question. I'd say the quick answer is you certainly don't drive it. Because you drive things that somehow have their own power, and this one you're powering yourself.
Well, that's a good clarification. So shed refers to some kind of motorized vehicle.
Well, it doesn't have to be motorized. It could be a horse, but
self-powered.
It's not your power.
Okay. But then leer, is that just then like you could be on an amusement park ride and you're riding it?
Yeah. Unless you're the front guy in one of those cars and you're in charge somehow.
Also, if you're like the captain telling them what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can somehow control the vehicle, that's driving.
But then everyone else would just ride in it as a passenger kind of thing.
Right. Even backseat drivers are riders.
Well, that's good. Do we have any questions from the audience yet? I don't see any hands. So I'm going to keep going with my list until somebody has another question. So one of the new words we just got was the word for infinity. Is this like a number type word? Would we use it in the same way we would use a number? So we can say something has an infinite length, or there's a infinite cups or something like that.
You can use it in the same way you use qep'a, same way you use zero. Although you could zero in more ways, but anyway.
Right. But that's good. Raising hands. Let me check something because they said raising hands is disabled.
There's probably a little arrow. You have to click on something and pick which hand you raise.
Huh, that's odd. Okay, well, I guess if you have questions, just give me a shout out in chatting and I will attempt to promote you that way. Or I will try to. Trying to keep track of all these different spots. Okay, so another question about the new words was qurgh, which is explore, which we've had for a long time as part of chorghDIch. The question was, do we explore things? Are they the direct object, or would we explore things as indirect objects? So like the example is chorghDIch, I explore space, or is it chorghDIch, I explore in space?
It's the second.
Okay. So you can't explore a specific thing?
Not with that verb.
Oh. Okay, I'm not quite sure. I'm actually going to promote Mike and ask him to ask his question because I don't really understand it properly. So if you have follow-ups, it'd probably be better for, if that's okay with, where is he? I know he's around here somewhere. Or he was. Of course, the names are not in alphabetical order. Aha, okay, I've now turned on the feature that lets you raise your hands. I found it. I'm kind of new to these as well, so hopefully if someone has a question, they can try doing that. But I don't actually see Mike in here. Okay, I'm going to ask Pupulu if you want to come up here and if you have a question. You're muted. And we can't hear you. If you're trying to talk, you may have to hit your push to talk button.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yes, so my question was about the, if I didn't catch it quite right, you said that the words for ride or drive, driving means that you have like moving on its, like by itself. So in that case, you wouldn't ride a horse, but you would drive a horse. Correct?
Probably correct. Let me double check that one with Maltz, but that's probably correct.
Okay. And then like riding a roller coaster would be considered the same as riding a bike. But riding a bike, you give the power yourself, but you are still in control. But is that like irrelevant when deciding which verb to use for
the
driving the bike?
Yeah, you're riding the roller coaster. That's straightforward enough. The bike is confusing because you're powering it yourself, and so I want to have a word that means to pedal or something like that, but I don't know if there is, and I have to check on that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I also kind of about the other question, but I can raise my hand again if there are people in the queue, so I can ask about that.
Thank you.
So this explore verb that you're talking about, you say that it doesn't take the
You cut out for a second there. It doesn't take the location.
location, but does it take a direct object at all? Can it be object? Is it stative?
What kind of object do you think it might be able to take?
I can't think of any that it could be. I'm wondering if there is something.
I can't think of any either. So I guess not.
So does that mean could it be stative?
No, it's not be explore.
Yeah. I'm not sure how you would use it statively, but
Like we might use exploring. I am exploring.
oh yeah, you can say that, sure.
Does that mean that a lot of these verbs that don't have direct objects could be stative, like flying? Like I fly, I can cause something to fly because it's not.
I'm just not quite sure the way you're using the word stative.
I'm still trying to grasp all the grammar myself, but there's a lot of verbs that we say
flying, for flying, you wouldn't use the verb for fly, okay, as a stative verb to mean something like flying fish. You'd have to say the fish that flies or something like that.
But it could be used for be. But this particular verb could be used for be exploring.
Well, that's just
yeah, in the sense that I am exploring, you are exploring, we're all exploring. In that sense, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Well, that was weird. Oh, Sakram, you have a question?
Okay, better. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Do you have a question?
Just to kind of pick up on that, I think just to clarify the last one, when you say stative, you use to be exploring, statively, just like you use any transitive verb without an object. But I think the question about stative was, can you use it adjectively? Can you use it as an adjective to say, the bee scouting man, the log clarv or something like that. I think that was the question.
Right, and I think the answer was no.
Okay.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Okay. Just checking. One thing I was wondering about, this might be obvious, but so can you say edjiachlo? Infinitely many.
Say again. The audio is funny here.
Sorry. Could you say edjiachlo for infinitely many times?
Oh, he's asking about.
Oh yeah, about infinite. Yeah. Like it. Yeah.
I thought that was obvious, but just checking. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a good question. Aha, Mike, you have a question.
Hi, yeah, Dr. Okrand. Hello.
Hello.
Great to see you, or virtually at least. I have a quick question about the new word roshmach for chromosome. And as I understand the explanation, we have roshmach pa is used for the, we'll call it the male chromosome or the Klingon equivalent of the Y chromosome, and roshmach bid for the Klingon equivalent of the X chromosome. So that translates literally into chromosome 0 and chromosome half. And I just was wondering if there was any sort of cultural, etymological backstory behind the use of 0 for the male chromosome and half for the female.
No, it's just throw the dice in the air and see what happens.
Okay.
So some people say they're having issues raising their hand, but it should be set so that everybody can.
I'm trying to take myself down from the stage now, and I can't figure out how to.
You're good. Okay, I'm gonna. I have a hard time with names, so.
Semenella. But thank you so much for pulling me up. My push to talk button may have some trouble, so if I cut out, just let me know. Good afternoon, Dr. Okrand. At last year's qep'a, you mentioned poo and gave the ASL sign finish. Can you speak a little bit more about the similarities between aspect in ASL and how aspect, especially perfective aspect, is used in Klingon?
A little bit. It's kind of, I don't know what I can add. It's kind of the same thing. It means that the action is over, is done already. It was a pool, and that motion in ASL works exactly the same way, as far as I know. I'm not sure. You know, when it happens doesn't make any difference. It's not tense related. Although, you know, frequently things that are over happened in the past, but it's not necessarily the case. It just means it's done. Is that enough, or do you need something more specific?
Well, that speaks to some of it, because there are sort of different competing interpretations, not competing, but certain different interpretations of how aspect is used in Klingon. Some people look at it from the more linguistic perspective of encapsulating an entire event as a single moment in time, or focusing more on the completion phase of the activity. And so sort of if you had some clarification that you could give to that.
Right now, no, but if you or somebody else wants to write something down with examples of what you're talking about and what the controversy is about, we can certainly look at it.
Well, I'd be more than happy to some point in the future. Thank you, sir.
Some people apparently can just jump up on the stage. This is amazing. I have actually another question about the new words we got. One of them was focus. Is that like I focus my camera?
Yep, that was what the request was. At least that's the way we interpreted it.
Do my eyes focus, or do I focus my eyes?
Your eyes don't focus on their own. You have to do something to them.
Okay, so if I get drunk, that means I cannot focus my eyes. It's not that my eyes just decide to not do it by themselves.
I think that's correct. I have to go back and look at the notes, but I think that's correct.
I've got through a lot of my written ones. So I'm going to go over here. Vongwit. Come on down. The price is right. Okay. Be sure to push your push to talk button. No? Well, I guess you are having some kind of audio issue, so I'm going to put you back in the audience for now. But raise your hand again and we'll circle back around. Ah, Fergus. What is yours?
So sorry, I can't raise a hand because I can just like move to the stage. So I have a question. Can I ask it now or should
Yes,
I?
go ahead. Go ahead.
One of the new words was "clen," which means to make sound of. If you use that word, can you say, for example, qogh, like to make musical sound, like for a radio? Can you say that the radio qogh to mean that some kind of music is coming out of the radio? And secondly, can you use it without an object, just to say clen, for it makes a sound without specifying what kind of sound?
Yes and yes.
Thank you.
Jodhar, you have a question?
Hello, with regard to the bicycle, would propel be adequate, or is that not the case because it doesn't involve volition regarding direction and speed?
I would say you can use it, but it's probably not the only verb that you can use.
Thank you.
This makes me wonder if Klingons have bicycles.
Klingons apparently have to talk about a lot of things that they don't know anything about.
It's the Herc. I blame the Herc. They brought all of this new stuff and then they took it with them, and Klingons are like, well, we can talk about it, but we don't actually use any of it.
Right.
Sekram, you have a question?
Yeah, the new word qib, filter, strain, sieve, sift. Is it transitive? If so, what's the object? And of course, obvious things like, does the cloth filter, or do I filter using the cloth, and stuff like that. Should probably just think about that every time you make a verb.
I got about half of that. Let's try again.
Sorry. The verb qib, which is to filter, strain, sieve, or sift. Is it transitive? If so, what is the object? And I guess things like, do I filter using the cloth, or does the cloth filter? Although that's probably stretching a little bit.
The original request. I was going to say. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it does take an object. The object is the thing that gets filtered. I don't know that it's stretching a little bit. If you're going to use a cloth as a sieve, you definitely have to stretch it, I would say.
So do you filter, so you say I filter water while using a whatever? Like I filter water using a sieve, or I filter water using something.
Yeah, right, yes.
Who asked that? I was asked by Jodhar, right?
No.
No? I was asked by somebody. Hey, people keep jumping in and off the stage. We need a bouncer. Aha, I know you have had a question for a little bit. Would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, hello, hi. My question is not about a specific word, but rather about a conversation we've been having all weekend. So I don't know, Mark, hello.
Hello.
If you saw the presentation earlier about LGBTQ words, etc., but it spawned bigger questions about sort of canon and things. And I'm not asking you to sort of weigh in on anything particularly, but instead, could you just talk about your relationship to the Klingon language community and how it's changed over time in terms of like, I'm imagining like, at certain times there's been sort of a trickle of words that you've asked Maltz for. At other times there's been lots of words that we've gotten. At other times you have sort of retroactively made words canon and things like that. So could you just sort of think about out loud, how word giving, canonicity has changed over time, that sort of thing, from your perspective?
Yeah, it has changed over time. I mean, originally, way back when, it wasn't an issue because I didn't know anyone was paying attention to me. But that obviously has changed. Haven't thought about this, obviously, exactly. But once upon a time, somebody, and actually, when I give talks about Klingon to Star Trek conventions or universities or whatever, one of the things that I talk about a little bit is the fact that once the Klingon speaking community got going, which is what is it now? It's over 30 something years. I didn't know that was happening when it got going. I didn't know that the people, looking at Klingon and studying it and all that and trying to speak it in a serious way until Lawrence got a hold of me and told me there's such a thing as the Klingon Language Institute, which I had no idea existed. Anyway, the Klingon speaking community, not me, decided that I should be the source of canon. That if I say it's okay, it's not me. It's Maltz. If Maltz says it's okay, it's okay. And if Maltz doesn't say it's okay, it's a question mark. As opposed to the speakers themselves making those decisions. As I say, that was not something that I came up with or imposed or anything like that. As time has gone along, clearly there's a lot of really, really good Klingon speakers. There are people who, there's people listening to me right now who are really, really good Klingon speakers. Who when talking to other really, really good Klingon speakers have to figure out how to say stuff. And so innovation is going on. Most of the innovation, as far as I know, is creative, if that's the right word, use of existing vocabulary and grammatical apparatus and stuff like that. I'm not aware of anyone making up a whole word that people then accept as part of the deal. I mean, you might make up a new word on the fly, and for purposes of the current discussion, this makes sense, but it doesn't sort of become a part of the language. Clearly, and in light of the thing this morning too, there's a lot of words that need to be created that ought to be thought about by the people using the language, not just me. For two reasons. One is because the people using the language are the ones using the language. And the second one is that one of these days, guys, you're on your own no matter what, because the world works like that. So the whole connection to the sole source of canon, has got to change, and is changing. I think it's in really good hands right now, meaning the people who are doing the serious talking about it really, really are taking it seriously, not just going glop glop, as opposed to some people in that city on the West Coast. So yeah, so that's what it is. I did not, unfortunately, hear the conversation this morning, although I was really pleased to see that it's going to be disseminated somehow or other. We'll look at that and see where that goes. I don't know if that's answering your question or not.
You went back into the audience. Please come back.
Yeah, it was that was very insightful as far as I'm concerned. I wonder if, this morning during the talk, we talked about the concerns of in-game and out-of-game, and I wonder if you would be interested for a brief moment to sort of peel back the curtain a tiny bit, like The Wizard of Oz, Let Us See Behind, and if you could talk about sort of Maltz and how the sort of fiction of Maltz and how you negotiate that or think about that, if you want, no pressure.
What are you talking about, fiction? things. Actually, how were you at the? I think you were at the qep'a in Germany when we figured out how malts could be in my basement if he didn't happen until the 23rd century or something. Were you there?
I vaguely remember a conversation about
that. For those who were wondering how malts ended up in my basement, since malts is from the 23rd century and I'm not, so how can the two of us exist at the same time? If you remember Star Trek III, that movie, at the end of it, the only Klingon, or at least the only Klingon who was in the movie, who survived, was Maltz. Also, I don't know if you know this or not, or notice this or not, Maltz is the only Klingon in that movie who, while we were filming, did not speak Klingon. As John LaRoquette, he had 0 lines of Klingon dialogue. There was one post-production line looped in, which is why there's 2 words for 1,000. Anyway, Maltz, the character, wanted Kirk to kill him. Kirk said, I'll do that later. And he put Maltz in the brig, I guess, on the bird of prey. And then they went their merry way. And then they eventually ended up retrofitting, or if that's the right word, the bird of prey. Retrofitting is the wrong word because they improved it. It grew in size somehow or other. And they took it to Earth, went back in time to go to Earth to save the whales and all that sort of thing. While all this was happening, Maltz was still on the bird of prey. They forgot all about him. So when they went back to Earth, Maltz went back with them and he escaped. And somehow he linked up with me, and that's why Maltz is in the basement. So it makes sense that Maltz is around.
Well, that's a fantastic story.
Yeah, in terms of Archa's question, consulting well. I mean, obviously pulling back the curtain here. You know, John LaRoquette and I talk all the time. No, that's a lie. The whole thing of Maltz came about when I wrote the Klingon dictionary, when I wrote the introduction. And it's almost to ask what that book is all about, because it's a very strange book, really. In writing the introduction, I wrote it as if I, Marc Okrand, was the researcher about all this stuff, not a speaker of the language necessarily. And my research was based on my informant, my native speaker, who had to be Maltz because everybody else I knew about was gone because they blew themselves up when the Enterprise blew up. So I thanked him and and that became the way of talking about where the language comes from. That's sort of the in-universe. You know, out of universe, it's me. I guess I have to say it's me. And I just use Maltz as an excuse, especially if I make a mistake.
Thanks.
Yotak, do you have a question?
Yes, but first I'd like to say that we really need a book about how you got Maltz. With regard to the word about filter, can you use that to describe filtering your words, or is it for physical processes only?
It's physical. It's physical filtering.
Thank you.
Yeah, for people who are looking at the new words, there is a link that takes you to the original request, and those were what were sent to Marc as well. So that will often give you a lot of insight into the word and how it might work. So for filter, it actually says to pass matter through a tool or implement in order to remove other types of material.
And I'm pretty sure that I followed those. I mean, I paid attention to those and thinking about how the words work and all that kind of stuff, unless I say otherwise. I'm pretty sure that that's an accurate statement I just made.
If it's not, we can blame Maltz.
Oh, we have to blame Maltz for everything, yeah. He has nothing better to do.
Okay, Beck, do you have a question?
Yes, I have more question about filtering, actually. If we have a qep'a, is that going to be referring to the actual sieve or cloth or membrane that something is getting filtered through? Or is that going to refer to the person or machine causing things to be passed through the membrane?
Yeah, this is why I don't like to talk about new words right after they're introduced. Let me go butt heads with Maltz about that one, because that has bigger implications.
Thank you.
Do you have another question while you're here?
No, thank you. I also don't know how to leave the stage.
Okay, so I have another written question that we got from Ishku, was asking, it's a question about the new words, but I think this is probably an easier one. That we got a word for bias, and there's the English expression of, I have a bias, they have bias. Does that carry over? Do Klingons have Raj biases, or do you think that there's a different verb that we should be using?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So we have a noun, and the question is, does the noun bias co-locate with have? So can I say, if I want to say I am biased, do I say I have bias?
Okay. So you want to know what verb goes to? Bias is the object of what verb? I think that's what the question is. That's a very good question. That's a good Maltz question.
Oh, I was hoping it was easy. Okay, so I think that's most of the written ones. So let's ask Pupulu to come back up.
Do you hear me again? Yeah.
Yep.
Good. There is a little bit noise in the background. I hope that doesn't matter. You already had the question about the Rach, but I would like to kind of clarify the question a little bit, because I was doing Duolingo and they used the word qurgh just to mean like sleep or sleeping, but I was thinking, can you actually do that? Like they used the qurgh in a very neutral way, in a way that it kind of sounded like the tah was there just to kind of fill in the rule that there has to be at least one suffix with rach. And I was just thinking, would qurgh actually like carry the implications of the suffix tah, like it is ongoing? Like, can you actually use qurgh for like just basically as the same word as sleeping in English?
Yeah, it's perfectly fine.
So it doesn't have the implication that it is continuous, like tah. Like
it's continuous. You're sleeping. You don't sleep for half a second, right?
But it refers to an instance of sleeping that is going on for a period of time. Is that?
There was this. The example was like sleeping is essential, and in this they used like qurgh,
which is fine. Yeah.
That is fine. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, like I said earlier, especially with Rach, that's probably worth 2 or 3 hours of discussion too. You can attach it to all kinds of things. That doesn't mean that you should. Although the sleeping example is fine.
Truck, you have a question?
Yes. Does Maltz have his own mailbox for regular mail, or does he get his mail through you?
He gets his mail through me. Yeah, maybe he should have his own mailbox. You know, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, everybody's. You just end up having to deal with more spam.
How do you say spam? We need a word for spam.
How do you say spam? What is the word for spam?
I don't know. I'll email Maltz and find out.
Probably going to be. No. Okay, so let me check my questions. Let me see. I think the only ones I have left are probably something that you want to not deal with here, like it's a question about questions as objects, which I think you probably want to think about, unless you.
Questions as objects.
Right.
And
So there's a sentence in a book that qurgh wrote that says "Nuk bop bom et shiv vajar," and it's in the question it's saying that the intended meaning seems to be Vajar wonders what the song was about, but it's got a question word in there, and the only example we have of a question word being used in a sentence as object, it turns it into an actual question. So it was the question is kind of, is that the right way to translate something like that? Or should if you have a question as the first part of a sentence as an object, will the final construction always end up as a question as well?
that's a good question. Yeah, you're right. Right. That I have to see various examples and stuff before figuring that one out.
I can send that to you, so you can think about it. Pechrush, do you have a question?
I do. Am I on?
You are.
Okay. To sort things out, verb for sort, so that I know what to keep and what to discard. We have qurgh. Does it cover it?
How did I translate you?
Qurgh was include, to consist, to be composed of, such as elements in a database.
So no, so that doesn't mean sort.
We had qurgh, filter the database, filter the data in it. I still need a new word for sort? qep'a.
I think so. I think so.
We
Yeah,
have
I'll put it on.
we have pak, which is to rank, assign status, sort, or compare.
If that's what you mean, then that's that. Yeah.
Okay, I have pat as a stative verb, not as an active verb.
Pakmoch would be to rank something,
Rank.
cause things to be ranked.
Okay, I like it. Thank you. Judge.
Fergus, you have a question?
Yes, I want to. Pupun asked about the rach suffix, and I want to ask again because I want to be absolutely certain about this. There is a previous example word, wovta rach, that refers to like continuous lights on a, for example, ship that irritate Klingon eyes or something like that. And it means continuous brightness. So if we have a word or sentence ut qurgh, does that mean continuous sleep is essential, or does that mean just that sleeping is essential? Like, does the qurgh still carry the meaning of tah, continuous? So it's continuous sleep that is essential.
All right, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the question.
If we think about sleeping, I think there might be continuous sleeping, and there might be, I'm not sure what the English word is, but that kind of sleeping where you wake up all the time and it doesn't work, or something like that. So does qurgh have the meaning continuous sleep, as in it doesn't refer to sleeping that isn't continuous?
It can certainly be used that way, yeah, yeah.
Does that answer what you were asking?
I think maybe this concept of aspect is a bit complicated, and I think the short answers may not like satisfy my deepest questions about the deepest nature of aspect, but I will. I understand that. I can't give us long answers now, so I'm satisfied.
Okay, I think your question was, could qurgh refer to interrupted sleep? Like if you're constantly waking up and getting up and then sleeping again for a little bit, is that the same thing? And I kind of would say, I think what Mark said was no, it wouldn't refer to your like broken sleep. It would only refer to the actual, the sleeping for a period of time, maybe the short bits in between, but not like the waking up part.
Yeah, that's what I intended. Now, what happens with questions like this, especially with something so complicated, is that works fine. Yeah, that makes sense. And then someone will come along and say, but what about? So until someone comes along and says, hey, but what about? Let's let it go with that.
In this specific context, it works, but it may not work in other contexts. And that's kind of what we always have to keep in mind, I think, is they're not necessarily universal rules. These are more of, it works there, but might not work over here. So we have to kind of look at each one individually.
Or you can use it, but just clarify what you're talking about if it's something not straightforward.
Thank you.
Aha, you had another question.
Yeah, I was going to read a question from the chat from Vong Wit. The question is, I often say a phrase such as, I've done this enough times that I can do this in my sleep, with enough times meaning so many times. Is there to express enough times or so many times?
I understood everything up until the question itself. What was the question? The very last sentence you said?
Is there a way to express enough times or so many times?
Sure, and I'll have to go find out what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking that. I saw the question and I got lost with all the things going on. Okay, you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, I certainly don't want to belabor the issue with qurgh. We've generally, used it with a type 7. That's the examples we've seen. And I guess if Mark can, either speak on or add some clarification about what other kinds of verb suffixes might be used also to color the use of qurgh on the verb.
As I say, qurgh needs I said a couple hours discussion. It probably needs a book.
Well, I don't. Does it specifically? Yeah, I didn't know. Does it specifically say a type 7? I know it says it's usually used with another suffix.
It's used.
To
It's,
not be
usually,
marked.
it's not. It's really not just slapped onto the verb. There's got to be something intervening. Now,
Exactly.
having said that, all kinds of things can intervene, and you could make stuff up. You could put not just with qurgh, with anything. You could put all kinds of suffixes together and end up with a construction that's grammatically okay, but I don't know what it means necessarily. Is it interpretable? You can do that in any language. You can follow the rules of the language and come up with something or other. It follows the rules, but it doesn't make any sense. So it's the same thing. It's the same with qurgh and with other things. As I just said, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. If you put something together and it makes sense, then that's great. That's terrific. That's a good word, good usage of it. And it doesn't necessarily have to correspond to something in English or French or anything else.
Okay, thanks. You can boot me off the stage.
Emid, do you have a question? I don't know how much time we were scheduled for this. Oh, we were supposed to end 15 minutes ago.
We finished 15 minutes ago, but hey, what they say.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I had a question about just sort of general linguistic processes that you may have noticed in sort of modern Klingon speakers' usage of the language. Do you have anything to say about that?
That I've noticed in modern speakers, modern Klingon speakers of the language. Do you have something, some kind of example in mind?
Not exactly. I'm kind of new to this, but in terms of linguistic processes, I'm thinking about, like, say, some languages will freely use, say, nouns to create verbs. And I'm wondering if you've noticed, the Klingon community maybe accidentally beginning to do things like that.
I haven't noticed that. There might be somebody in the audience who has. When I listen to Klingon conversations as extemporaneous conversations, as opposed to someone who wrote a story and thought about it and edited it and stuff like that. There's a few words that I hear a lot that I'm not surprised to hear, because they're perfectly fine words, but I'm just kind of surprised to hear them as frequently as they seem to come up. Although it makes sense when looking back on it. One of them is edge, meaning and. It's kind of blah 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 edge, blah 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 edge, blah 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 edge. I hear that a lot. Of course, you hear that a lot. You hear and a lot in English too. I remember earlier on at some qep'a or other, thinking, gee, people say petville a lot, forcefully, or ghaitan, they say a lot. Why those particular adverbial things? I don't know. The other day I was hearing something, and qurgh came up a lot. So there's stuff that people are doing that it's perfectly fine to do, but the frequency of usage is more than I would have expected.
Like qurgh.
Like qurgh, you got to use that when you're stuck with that. I'm sorry.
If I could do a quick follow-up, do you have any interest in, say, analyzing Klingon as a linguist and potentially, writing like a dissertation on these things?
Actually, that would be interesting. I already wrote a dissertation. I have no interest in writing another one. I'll tell you that part. But yeah, it would be really interesting to see how people are using the language. Obviously, 99.9% of the time when people are using the language, I'm not there, so I don't know, what people are doing that they might be doing in an interesting way that I wouldn't have predicted.
So to follow up on that, were there things? Well, I was going to say, are there things that you thought might become that didn't, like edge, something you thought might have been something that people would use a lot, but they didn't. But then when you were creating it, that wasn't something you were expecting.
So you mean in the same thing reverse? Not that I can think of. There probably is, but not that I can think. But again, when I was first creating it in the very first place, I didn't think anybody was going to say anything. except the actors, and they were, you know, they didn't have any choice.
Well, I'm very happy that you persisted, and I appreciate everything you've done and do.
Good, thank you.
I'm not even going to try.
Worte or just Andre. Just to follow up on what Emiad or Emid just asked for about, or what you, Mark, said about the words that are currently very much in use and you hear very frequently. So one word I hear very frequently is toch, which was translated, let me check, as so and well or aha. And I actually hear it in two different meanings. And one of the meanings is something like, oh, really? Oh, I see. Like, I understand. I realize something. And the other meaning I hear it used is something like what's the word for that? When you think about something like let me think, well. And could you maybe explain which of these uses is the one that is intended, and also maybe if the other one is incorrect then?
The second one is what was intended. It was a well, so, aha, you know, here we go, something like that. Is what the thinking was. If I remember correctly, that word might have been a retrofit. It might have been a lip sync thing for the English word so, like so, blah, blah, blah. So let's get on with it. I think that's true, but I'd have to check. That doesn't make any difference. It's still a perfectly fine word, but it means it's an introductory kind of thing. You know, probably one of the most common words in spoken English is well. If you ask anybody a question, they'll begin to listen to people. If you ask someone a question, they'll begin the answer with, well, da-da-da-da-da, especially on news programs and things like that. And that's what toch is. It said, well, let's get going here. It's really interesting to hear that other usage of which makes perfectly good sense as a semantic shift. I'll accept that. If Maltz won't, I'll tell him he should, and he tends to pay attention to me. And that's a really good example, you know, circling back to one of the earlier things we were talking about of how the language changes on account of people actually using the language. I think that's terrific.
So in other words, so if someone asked, no, if someone said something like, by the way, you're muted or your microphone isn't working, could the other person then say, toch? Like in the sense of, oh, right, yeah, I see.
Probably not. It's not. I don't know. I mean, if that's the way people are using it, then yeah. But it's not like, oh, I misunderstood. It doesn't mean that. It means like, well, maybe it does. Let me think about that. Yeah, it does not mean do. It does not mean, you know, what Homer Simpson says.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Toch, do we have any more questions?
Exactly.
Shot.
Yes, with regard to creating new words, I'm trying to kind of understand the process. Is your first port of call trying to get inside the Klingon mind, or is it more a purely linguistic process?
It depends on why I'm doing it. You know, somebody asked me recently in the last few days, this Zoom thing is amazing. I've been doing, you know, interviews and stuff like that I haven't more than I've done in a long time because it's so easy with this. Anyway, one of the questions I got was, you know, how do you decide what words to make up, you know, what for vocabulary? And my answer was, you know, initially, I didn't decide at all. Initially, I was given a script, and here we need Klingon versions of sentences, or we need Klingon sentences that mean these things, and that's all. And then as working on the other films and stuff, the vocabulary grows. And in fleshing out vocabulary for the dictionary, that was probably the most arbitrary thing I ever did, where I said, "Oh my God, we've got to make up a whole bunch of words. What should they be? What should they be?" And pull them out of the air, I guess. But most of the other stuff has been in response to something. It's been in response to a need for a film, or some other kind of project, or somebody was translating something or other, needed words for that. Or in the case of the new words from yesterday and from a year ago, I got a list of 100 words or whatever it was, and we want words that mean this, 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 and this. So I didn't have to think at first blush in terms of getting into the Klingon mind versus doing some kind of linguistic analysis or something or other, because you wanted a word for filter. Okay, come up with a word for filter. Having said all that, then yeah, in thinking about it, I'm thinking not so much as the form of the word, because that's arbitrary, but how is it used, that or whether it should be a new word or it should be a compound noun or something, that involves thinking about Klingon culture for sure, at least as much as I can, because it's, again, the examples I've used before is making up a word for Klingon or any other conlang for that matter should not be just gloop glop. That's how you say it, just cause. There's got to be something behind it.
And speaking to that, I know I talked to you about this before, but how has your outlook on that kind of thing changed? I know you've said in the past you were a little bit more hesitant about creating Klingon culture things.
Yeah, when I wrote the dictionary, and I wrote the dictionary at the time of Star Trek III, it was written sort of after the filming and before the movie came out. It was written in that period, mostly. Well, yeah, it didn't come out till a bunch of, the book was supposed to come out, I told you guys this before, or the ones of you who are repeat offenders here. I wrote the book, I got the idea of writing the book while we were shooting Star Trek III, and wrote it after shooting was over, and finished it and sent it off. I think I sent it, I don't remember if I sent it off to the publisher or not. I probably didn't, but I was in negotiation with the publisher anyway, and it was a done deal. It was supposed to happen. And the plan was that the book would come out when the movie came out. And there was all this talk about selling the Klingon dictionary in the lobby when you would go to see Star Trek III and things like that. But things got delayed at Pocketbooks, at the publisher, and they got delayed for complex bureaucratic reasons that I don't understand. But the short version is that they took the manuscript, which at one point they had, and put it on the shelf and somehow misfiled it or something. And then the person in charge left the company and everyone forgot that it was even happening and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, because of all of that delay, I was able to incorporate the edits and changes that they made that forced changes to the language when they did post-production on the film. So they did things like change lines that were originally in English into Klingon, so I had to come up with more Klingon vocabulary and grammar to fit the English lip movements. They changed, in one case, they changed a subtitle. It originally meant one thing and suddenly it means something else that was utterly unrelated, and so on. But because of the delay in the dictionary, anyway, despite all that, when I included in the dictionary all of the words that I'd made up for Star Trek III, whether they ended up in Star Trek III or not, because I made up a bunch of stuff. It's normal movie making that just didn't get used. I also included words related to Star Trek, the original series, that involved from episodes that involve Klingons somehow or other, and included whatever new words I made up because of this post-production, changing things around. Had the book consisted only of those words, it wouldn't have been a very hefty book, because there weren't all that many words. So I said, okay, we've got to flesh it out. That's when I just arbitrarily made up stuff. And in arbitrarily making stuff up, I impose on myself, and I mentioned this in the introduction to the dictionary, two restrictions. I'm not, other than the words that I made up for the film and other than the words that related to the original series, I'm not going to make up any words that have anything to do with Klingon geography or Klingon culture. And the reason for that was not because there shouldn't be more words related to those things. There should. But I'm not a story writer. I'm not a screenwriter, a script writer. And I didn't want to make up something then later on in some episode of something or other in another movie, the writers would come up with something that utterly contradicted what I'd made up. I figured that let them make it up, and then I'll tell them what it's called if they're interested. I've changed my mind about that over the years. That's what qurgh was talking about. And so, as time went on, I did start, especially when I was getting into Galactic Traveler, did start making up stuff about Klingon culture and stuff, but I don't think I made up anything that would in any important way contradict anything that a scriptwriter might come up with, or at least not in a way that we couldn't rationalize it after the fact, which I've gotten better and better at.
And now we've kind of gone full circle, because with qorgh working on Discovery, she bases her knowledge of the language on what you've created, and so it kind of self-enforces itself at this point. I don't know.
Well, she bases it on what I've created, and she also bases it on what they're talking about in Discovery, what kinds of things. So qorgh did all kinds of incredibly clever things to talk about, what had to be talked about in that series.
Hello, Dr. Okrand. In the past, you talked about when you wrote the Klingon dictionary, you wrote it for sort of a generalist audience. Have you ever considered rewriting it for linguists, like with some interlinear gloss and maybe an IPA chart?
Yeah, when I wrote it originally, I wouldn't say it was written for generalists, although I suppose that's fair. It was written. It was written for Star Trek fans primarily, and it was written as a parody a little bit. And what I mean by that, and again, it was never written to be the be-all, end-all, to be the complete thing, and it was certainly never written to be a teaching tool. It was a reference tool, but it was a reference tool. The word I used again was parody. When I was doing it, I'm pausing because there's sort of two lines of development here. When I first wrote it, when I sat down to write it, I realized at some point that I was writing for linguists and not writing for Star Trek fans. So I threw that one out and started over again and did it in a different way. In terms of the dictionary part, and the grammar part too, to a certain degree, but in terms of the dictionary part, you may have noticed and been horribly frustrated by the fact that the definitions are ambiguous. You don't know whether to use the word this way or that way. You don't know whether it could be the same as or different from something or else. And as I was doing that, I was quite aware that I was doing that. And I was doing it because I was thinking of Berlitz type dictionaries. I'm going to Sweden, so I pick up the Swedish, 100 phrases I need if I'm going to visit Stockholm thing. And there's the little dictionary part, and they all have these little one-word definitions of one words, and it's the same thing. Well, do I use it this way or that way? How does it work? So I was making a book that's sort of comparable to those. And in the grammar part, I'm explaining the grammar, and I would say things like, well, it works like this, except for when it doesn't, which is not very helpful. And that was intentional, because I was kind of riffing on these guidebooks. And again, the intent was not to explain everything completely, or in some cases even clearly, because I didn't think that this group would ever be formed and anyone was really going to do all this kind of thing. In retrospect, what a dumb decision that was. I thought about doing it over again, or writing a more complete one. Yes, I thought about it. At one point, I was in discussions with the publisher about a revised version of the dictionary, which would have been more complete and explicit and things like that. And the powers that be at a corporation, we all know and love, decided that was not a good idea, so it didn't happen.
Thank you for your answer. I appreciate it.
Okay, I think we'll take one more and then we will wrap up.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, hey, Dr. Okrand. New time person who also jumped on the bandwagon on this like parody book. One of the things I sort of like, I guess, enjoyed learning the languages as we got more deeper into it is I noticed a lot of the words seem to like mirror like wordplay, like they seem to have some connectivity to Federation concepts, and there seems to be a lot of puns. I guess at what point did you decide that some words should be based on, should be, I guess, pun based rather than any other sort of reason?
I don't know what you're talking about. Of
My
course I know
bad
what
I'm sorry.
The number of coincidences in Klingon vocabulary compared with English or other languages defies the odds. It is beyond explanation. Nobody knows how that happened. Actually, all that stuff started in the original thing, and the way it started, frankly, is when I was doing the dictionary part of the dictionary. I realized that I was having the arrangement would be a column on the left and a column on the right. So a column on the left would be English and the column on the right would be Klingon, or vice versa in the other part of the dictionary. And when we were working on the film on Star Trek III, in the various discussions that were going on, not about the language, but just about the film in general, one of the ideas they had in mind when designing the bird of prey, designing the Klingon ship, was there was a German movie that was very, very popular at the time called Das Boot, which was about people on a submarine. And the people on the submarine were in very cramped quarters, all kind of swooshed together. And people said, in designing the bridge, let's do it like Das Boot, where it's kind of small and cramped and stuff like that. I remember hearing about Das Boot. I heard about the movie separately, but during production, Das Boot. So when it came time to start making up words, I'm thinking, okay, what do I need words for? What do Klingons wear? What's their clothes? Oh, they wear boots. These big, heavy boots. Oh, that's the same as boat in this German movie thing. So it became Das, became the word for boat. And I'm thinking that in and of itself isn't it. What it was is on the left side it says Dash, and the right across it says boat. So if you read across, it says Dash boat. That's funny. I'll put that in. And that's how it got started. And there's a few more things like that in there in the original thing. And some people think that perhaps all that got carried away. I don't know. I have discovered, however, that you people, or some of you people anyway, have found connections between Klingon words and words in other languages that I didn't know about. So it's absolutely fascinating.
Cool. Thank you very much. So I shouldn't look at all into depth at any of the new words. I should just take the face value.
Absolutely. Why would you think there'd be a joke in any of the new words?
Cool. Thanks for that. Make sure we add that to canon. Thank you very much.
Okay then. Well, thank you very much for everyone asking these questions. Thank you so much for Dr. Okrand for coming here and answering all these questions. Sorry to put you on the spot with some of these, and I'm sure we'll communicate with some stuff for Maltz so we can clarify a few points.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the qep'a. I'll be in and out over the next day and a half.
Thank you.